So it was heartbreak for England in the finals of Euro 2024 when Spain ultimately beat them 2-1. That result itself wasn't entirely surprising. Spain were favourites throughout the competition, and many people, including most England fans, would have probably been quite surprised at the manner in which Gareth Southgate's side reached the final of the tournament. Obviously, as you could probably tell from my accent, I don't make a habit of talking about England, of making my points about England, of making opinions about England. But I thought it was quite interesting just to kind of narrow in on what's going on with the England team at this tournament, and the kind of weird paradox that Gareth Southgate is probably one of England's best ever managers, but ultimately may have proved to be the difference maker between England winning the final and them ultimately losing it. You can rhyme off a whole bunch of stats to kind of underline why Southgate has been one of the best England managers easily of my lifetime, but over the course of the history of football. You'd have to go all the way back to Sir Ralph Ramsey to talk about an England manager who's got a better points per game average. And of course, reaching back-to-back tournaments for England is more or less unheard of. Prior to reaching the last tournament finals of Euro 2022, England had to go back 55 years to the last time they reached the final of a World Cup or a European Championship. So there's no doubt that Southgate has done something remarkable and something that no England manager before him, prior to maybe Sir Ralph Ramsey, had done. Although England obviously weren't favourites going into the final, on paper they had a squad certainly comparable to Spain's. They undoubtedly had the most valuable squad going into the competition, and whether you want to argue about the point of market values or the fact that, you know, there's this perceived England tax when we talk about the value of English players in the modern game, there's no denying that this national team is full of world-class players. It's not the golden generation of previous years where we had very good Premier League players. It's a team full of, you know, undoubted world-class players who play not only in the Premier League but also abroad and are key players for some of Europe's biggest clubs. Harry Kane at Bayern Munich is a good example, but of course Jude Bellingham at Real Madrid is another great example. We're no longer talking about England team full of good Premier League players. We're talking about an England team full of bona fide world-class players. And that's what makes the manner in which England kind of performed in this tournament so interesting. I've always had this theory that to win international tournaments, you have to have a full squad of quality players. You can't really rely on one or two outstanding players. Of course, the last World Cup was defined by Lionel Messi's success with Argentina, and before that, Kylian Mbappe with France. But if you actually get down to the nitty-gritty of it all, these national teams are kind of built on overall squad value and overall squad strength and depth in them. And rather than focusing on which team has the best player, it usually comes down to which team has the fewest poor players. And that's why we are beginning to see in the international game these European nations who develop so much abundance of quality players really can't get into the latter stages of the competition. Obviously, Spain are the perfect example of that, but France have done a great job of that as well because they developed great youth players. And England have also really stepped up their game in this regard in the course of the last 20 years, which is why going into the tournament, England not only had one of the most valuable starting 11s or some of the best individual players, but they arguably had the best squad out of all the players or all the countries going into this competition. And that in itself, I think, has maybe masked some of Southgate's misgivings as a head coach for the England national team. If we even just kind of go through the manner in which England got through this tournament, we can see that it was substitutes that often had to come on and kind of win the day for England, which on the one hand can be put down to Southgate picking great players and picking the right opportunities to add these players into the match. But it can also be put down to the simple fact that he just had such an abundance of great players that regardless of who he brought on, they were always going to make a difference. You know, we can talk about Ivan Toney's assist for Harry Kane in the Slovakia game, Ollie Watkins' goal in the latter stages of the match against Holland, or even Cole Palmer's goal against Spain to kind of equal it for England before Spain obviously went on to win a dramatic last-minute winner. These are all players who are top players. They're not players who had to be surgically placed into the right circumstances or the right tactics to get the best out of them. It's not as if Southgate had to find a way to get Toney to play or find a way to get Watkins to thrive for England, or certainly find the right system to get the best out of Cole Palmer. These are all top-class players who, when they came on the pitch, knew what to do and went about winning games or levelling scores for England throughout the tournament. And as a result, it does kind of give the impression that it wasn't so much that Southgate was picking the right substitutes, it's just a case that England's strength and depth continued to get them over the line until, of course, they come up against the Spanish side who had a similar strength and depth, but perhaps had a better head coach. When we go through Gareth Southgate's tactics at Euro 2024, there are a lot of issues with it, and there's a lot of holes you can pick in the way that England played. The most high-profile one is, of course, Harry Kane, and the manner in which he just simply wasn't fit for this competition. This is such an odd one because anyone who's watched Bayern Munich this season could have told you that this was a problem that had been brewing since maybe the start of the year. February was perhaps the first time they really noticed it with Harry Kane. Thomas Tuchel was struggling with the issue of where to drop Kane for Bayern almost 6 months ago. So it's not as if Kane picked up an injury on the eve of the competition and Southgate wasn't entirely sure what to do with him. He was severely unfit long before Euro 2024, and it became only more abundantly clear when he played him throughout the tournament. And this is something we definitely noticed as the tournament went on. Yes, Southgate did make some changes, but he was also too reliant on players that he's relied on in previous competitions, and in many ways almost relying on name and brand and profile of these players over which ones actually deserve to start. Another example, of course, you can kind of go through this entire team, but another one that really stood out to me was, of course, Kyle Walker in the terms of the way that he was still very good defensively as a right back, but he offered absolutely nothing going forward in an attacking sense. Equally, Kieran Trippier on the left-hand side was another player who struggled throughout the competition. Luke Shaw eventually came in and, did okay, but the fact that Trippier had been picked at left back going into the competition when Southgate could have picked a naturally left-footed player like Tyreek Mitchell at Palace or Lewis Hall at Newcastle as something of an understudy to Luke Shaw, and players who would have fitted into the system at left back over a bigger name who had to kind of get shoehorned in there was a really bizarre move. Equally, Jude Bellingham and Declan Rice were such fascinating players as well. Of course, Bellingham, did step up with the goods at times. I think he finished the tournament with 2 assists, one, of course, in the final, and that remarkable overhead kick as well. So despite his clear jadedness, he still had that kind of world-class quality to win games, but it was clear throughout the tournament that he was really struggling to kind of, impose himself on the match. And equally, Declan Rice was one of the players I was most disappointed in over the course of the competition, simply because it felt as though he was playing with one hand tied behind his back. He spoke about, I think before the tournament or maybe during it, that Southgate had given him clear instructions to defend that back line, play as a classic defensive midfielder and really slot in alongside the centre-backs, which is an odd move when you consider that both full-backs themselves weren't attacking either. So in a sense, Southgate was playing with a very defensive midfielder in front of a very defensive back line. And that in itself, I think, really came to the fore against Spain, who had 2 outstanding full-backs in Carvajal on the right, Cucurella on the left, who just bombed forward the entire game. They had this, incredible kind of bravery and courage to kind of go on and win the game, where England's system of having Luke Shaw, who was half fit, Kyle Walker, who offered very little going forward, and of course Declan Rice, who struggled to kind of get over the halfway line throughout the match, playing very defensive, very timid football. And it just felt like at the end of the day, even though both nations had equal quality of players, one head coach was kind of playing within himself, playing the players who didn't deserve to play it in terms of their fitness and form, and also playing a very defensive system. So when we put that all together, it feels like a tournament in which England kind of pushed their way through it out of sheer kind of quality and strength and depth, almost in spite of their manager and the tactics he tried to play throughout the tournament. And that might be quite harsh on Gareth Southgate. And, as I said at the top of the video, he will be remembered as one of England's best ever head coaches if he does indeed decide to move on. But there's just too much kind of evidence throughout this competition to suggest that up against top-class managers in this tournament, and when it came really down to it, especially in the final, and of course this has echoes to the previous Euro final, Southgate just didn't really have the tactical acumen to really kind of break down Spain, get out their weaknesses, and ultimately get the best out of what is, in my opinion, one of the most gifted England squads of the last 50 years.